Hey class, welcome back. If you check out the board behind me, we're going to go through some of the notes today that we saw with Dr. Guccione's excellent lecture on infectious diseases. I will show you, the notes are a little more free form today. I'll show you the stuff that we're responsible for, of course, in class, the things that are going to show up on a test, that sort of thing. But also a little bit of a recap of where we've been today with Dr. Guccione, or for two of the classes where you're going tomorrow with her. Excellent little demonstration on infectious diseases. And one of the things that she did, I'll show you how we would do it if you were here in class in person, but how Dr. Guccione approached it, which was awesomely cool, using the little beads and everything that she had handed out that you picked up if you were able to pick it up here at the campus. So we started off with the infectious diseases, things that can infect you. In other words, if you look at the incomplete list up here of the things that can infect you in this world, the things that are trying to get inside your body and reproduce, bacteria, viruses, fungi, and parasites are the big four that we study in this class. Of course, we've talked about bacteria. We've talked about it in terms of, for example, the strep throat and all the bacterial infections you can get. Usually that's U bacteria, not archaebacteria. Viruses, of course, and what this class really focused on today was, of course, COVID-19, coronavirus, and some of the variants that are coming out right now, the mutations that are allowing some strains of the coronavirus to actually infect people more efficiently, if you will. Fungi, everything from things like athlete's foot to thrush to other diseases that are caused by fungus. Parasites, some of the nastier things out there. One-celled organisms usually that take up residence inside your body that can cause some really nasty diseases. That was one of the ones we talked about, for example, Giardia, making sure that you have boiled your water if you go camping in the high Sierra. This one I put in here just for completeness. We don't really talk about it much in the class, but I still want to include it. Prions, it's not a living thing. It's not a virus. It's a type of protein that can affect other proteins and cause a type of disease. Not really something that we cover in this class too much, but again, I wanted to put it up here for completeness. One of the cool things that Dr. Guccione started us off on today was talking about the crossovers between math and science. In other words, when we're looking at graphing the viral load, we're looking at graphing how quickly, for example, bacteria and viruses can reproduce. We've seen some of these curves before in this class. You might remember too, and put on the glasses here, I still had this in the back of the classroom, so I wanted to pull up again and show you. We used a little bit of math here doing bell curves. You saw that we had a lot of number 9s when we were rolling the dice. We did the bell curve thing because we did a little bit on the curves that you recognize perhaps for radioactive decay of elements, the curves that you recognize for how logarithmically bacteria increase or even yeast increase in number, and then they kind of plateau off. Those were some of the things that you see again and again, and that's why we use math all the time in science. There's a lot of crossovers there. Now, with the experiment that Dr. Guccione did, I'm going to go flip screens here in just a little bit. And again, I'm just jotting some things down. That's why it's kind of free form today. It's not really organized notes up here, although I will, again, at pacificascience.org in your Google Classroom, put out a write-up of where we've been today. But let's see, we did a little bit in the first class, not so much the second one, on bacteriophages. It's a particular type of virus that specifically infects bacteria. It's really important in research, but there are a whole class of viruses out there that never affect people directly, but they do infect bacteria. Viruses have been along with us, evolutionarily speaking, as long as there's been life, as far as we know. They're absolutely fascinating in terms of the way that they get into and can incorporate themselves into the genome. Moving on from here, we did a little bit of an online activity where Dr. Guccione had some beads that were collecting in squares, the squares representing classroom, and showing how quickly everyone in a population can get infected. Now, there was variation along those lines, and the variation goes along really, really well with the very last screen I'll show you about Punnett squares, which we'll be getting later. As an example on the screen right now, I was trying to think of, okay, how could I explain this, what she did online? And instead of going over again exactly what she did, because again, those will be in the write-up, if we were in class together, this is one of the things that we used to do. I'm going to reach over here off screen for just a second and give you a quick example. You might remember this. This is a glow-in-the-dark star. You might remember these little flashlights right here, UV flashlights, and you might remember that it makes things glow. Well, we also use the UV light. I don't know if you can see that. It's kind of a bluish light. And you'll notice if you have UV and it shines on white, I think I've got some white on my shirt right there, I'll make it fluoresce, make it glow. One of the experiments that we do in class, and you can imagine this, even though if we're not in class together right now because of distance learning, you can imagine this when I think. We have a few students have some invisible ink on their hands. You can't see it when it's on your hands, but you can see it. It reflects in UV light. And you are assigned a few students in the class to randomly shake hands with, and we keep a chart of how many students get the invisible ink transferred to their hands from a handshake randomly. We do it 1 iteration, 2 iterations, 3 iterations, trials, and we see how long it takes to get everyone in the class infected. Usually, it only takes about 3 or 4 trials to get everyone in the class infected. That was what Dr. Guccione showed us today, using the squares representing classrooms in a school and different colored beads representing somebody who might, for example, have COVID-19 and how many other people they are then brought into contact with. One of the excellent things that Dr. Guccione then was able to do, I don't think we got to it in first period, so that's especially what I want to point out to first period class, was how much it's important to wear masks. In other words, masking up, making sure that we're covering ourselves and not spreading virus particles is extremely important in slowing down COVID-19. Finally, moving on, the last little part right here. Hey, look, 3 screens today. She had presented us with a graph that looks something like this, the number of infections plotted against time and how it plateaus off. This was when Dr. Guccione was talking about going for herd immunity, something that we do not want to do in terms of COVID-19. Herd immunity means that so many people have been infected that it stops or slows down the spread of the virus. However, if you think about it, if that many people are getting infected, that means there would be a tremendous number of people dying from the virus. Obviously, we're trying to avoid that. If you're looking at Dr. Anthony Fauci's statement, and remember, we know Dr. Anthony Fauci from current events. He's a top infectious disease specialist in this country. And the one thing that Dr. Fauci had for years warned about with other presidents, he is currently the medical advisor to President Biden. The incubation period, in other words, the time that you have COVID before you show any symptoms of COVID-19 is very, very long. This was exactly, according to Dr. Fauci, the type of virus they're always worried about coming along eventually. In other words, it's easily catchable, very catchy. It's a respiratory disease that you can breathe in, but you can pass it around for a very long time before you know you have it. So COVID-19 has been particularly difficult to battle that way because, one, masking and masking mandates, it got turned into a political issue, unfortunately, and really it's a medical issue. In other words, by masking, by stopping virus particles being transmitted through the air, through reducing the number of droplets, that is one way to not reach, this plateau that they're talking about, to slow down the spread. On the notes, I will in particular talk about something called an R number. This is how many people get infected. If one person has the virus, how many others do they infect? You want to get that R number below 1. Right now in the United States, it is above the number 1. And so you're trying to make sure that if a person has the virus, they do not infect, obviously anybody else, but ideally, on average, one person does not infect more than one other person. You want to get that number below 1. So look for that in the notes today. So that was a very quick rundown of some of the things Dr. Guccione talked about today. Don't forget, notes-wise, we'll be responsible for the 4 things that can affect humans that we study in this class. Bacteria, viruses, fungi, or fungus, and parasites. And prions, just a special little case that I wanted to mention. I'll see you online. We're going to have one more class with Dr. Guccione tomorrow. That's 4th and 6th period. And then we'll be back to our regularly scheduled programming. There is no vocabulary this week. There will be an online test. The online test will not be due Wednesday like usual. We're going to push the due date back till Friday since we have a guest speaker 2 days this week. Take care, everybody, and I'll see you online. Take care. Bye-bye.